Okay, let's begin.
Morning, Patriot listeners. We thank you for tuning in to Political Pitchforks, a new show on AM 1280 The Patriot, now airing Saturday mornings from 9 to 10 a.m. Political Pitchforks will bring you candid talk about state and national issues that may impact our freedoms, and we're going to discuss what our elected leaders are and are not doing to protect and defend our liberties. I am Susan Shogren Smith, a longtime conservative activist hoping to join others who love our country to save America from the progressive left and disengaged masses. I'm here with Jeremy Munson, a highly respected political strategist and former Minnesota legislator, and today we also have Jay Duggan. Jay's a businessman, but he also is known for his work with Rocks and Cows, which influences a lot of people, especially in outstate Minnesota, who live in Rocks and Cows territory. So anyways, we're in the midst of a busy season, I'm sure, for Jay, so I'm very thankful for him joining us this morning. So this has been a sad week in Minnesota politics. There was an assassination of Representative Melissa Hortman. Her husband was also murdered, and Senator John Hoffman and his wife were shot and thankfully survived. Minnesota and people around the country are shocked and stunned at what's happened. Jeremy, I'd like to turn it over for you. You serve with and knew these legislators.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. Absolutely horrific to learn about the assassination of Melissa Hortman. I served with her every year that I was in the legislature. And when I came in, Republicans had control of the House, but the second term that I served, second and third terms, Melissa Hortman was our speaker. And the Speaker of the House controls the budgets for the minority caucuses. And so you have to work with the Speaker on budgets and getting legislation heard and things like that. So I had, as when we started the new House Republican caucus, where there was 4 of us, we met with her every week and talked about a lot of issues. And Melissa Hortman was, I know that she led a pretty radical extreme group of Democrats, but she was on the more moderate spectrum of the Democrat side. And she and I both had something in common, which was that our parties were shifting to the left. And she had the Posse Caucus on her left. I had a lot of establishment Republicans that were voting more Democrat and growing government in our party, but we talked about that often. And she had a very tough task of bringing together both the Posse Caucus on her side and the more moderate rural Democrats on her side. Amazingly, she got them to lock arms when they had the trifecta and cram legislation through to drastically alter our state, in my opinion, for the worse. But she was a good leader on their side. She did a good job for her party.
Right. So what do you think, Jay? Could you have ever imagined this happening?
No, the whole situation is crazy. And as Jeremy mentioned, Melissa Hortman may have been the leader, and it may have been her job to rally the troops and round up and try and accomplish the goals her caucus had outlined for her. But she was not an extreme or radical person. Senator Hoffman, who was shot, probably in better times with a more organized, well-funded Republican Party, he may have crossed the aisle. He was right down one of those folks, at least that's the way he was perceived from the Republicans in the legislature. And to hear that Senator Ann Rest and New Hope may have had somebody parked out. Also another person, while she's a Democrat, very moderate, traditional, old school Union Democrat. None of these crazy ideas we talk about nowadays came out of her brain. And so why is a crazy person, I don't know. To me, it just shows whoever did this is missing a few bolts and nuts upstairs. It's sad, pointless, tragic, accomplishes absolutely nothing.
I think what's frustrating for me is the immediate effort always when tragedies happen to try and figure out, is this person a Democrat? Is this person a Republican? Why would they do this? And the reality is we have a serious problem with mental health in Minnesota and this country, and we are doing an abysmal job treating mental health disorders. As my background in the past and currently as a disability rights advocate, I can't tell you the number of families I have spoken with and worked with. By the way, in some of those families, when I was the director of early childhood programs at Pacer Center, families who had young children, 5, 6, 7 years old, who already were putting their siblings in danger, 5, 6, literally children at that age already with mental health issues that are dangerous to the people that they are being cared for. So when we see now the growing violence in our society, those children now would be in their 20s because of when I used to work there. But we know that the mental health statistics are in no way getting better at all. And I know, Jeremy, I'm sure when you were in the legislature, there was a lot of attention placed on how do we address mental health. Everything we're doing is failing.
Yeah, certainly. And, especially when an event like this happens, there's a lot of work behind the scenes to try to figure out what the status is, what's going on, were these guns purchased legally? What did this person, were they able to own guns? And then, of course, people do ask about what their political affiliation, what their motive is to try to come out with a response. And there was a lot of spin on both sides of the aisle out there, Democrats calling him a Republican, Republicans calling him a Democrat. And I love this post by the Data Republican on Twitter that basically just called him out as just, being crazy. Like you said, he just is starved for attention and wanted to do something where he could gain notoriety, and in a similar vein to what school shooters do, and where they, instead of committing suicide, they want to go out with some kind of blaze of glory and have the media talk about them for a week or two or a month. And, I noticed that during school shootings, when I was in office, I talked with some people from Canada, and they actually have a prohibition of mentioning the shooter's name on the news, like to prohibit them from being glorified so that there won't be copycats. And of course, we have the First Amendment in this country, and we can't stifle free speech, and the media is free to report things. But, it's also an important time to call on the media to do the right thing and to report this for what it is, or maybe not mention the person's name, not read their manifesto on the news, so that other people don't follow in this person's footsteps of trying to glorify themselves and raise awareness of their issues or what they believe in.
Right. Well, and the family immediately was identified, the wife talking about her being, stopped earlier in the day, and a lot of issues trying to be made about that. I can tell you again from my advocacy experience, if you have a family member that is exhibiting signs of serious mental illness and you seek help, honestly, there's almost nothing anybody can do unless you have absolute evidence that they're going to do something. That people will talk all the time about how they tried to get help, they tried to raise concerns, and nothing can be done. And there's a line somewhere, we don't exactly know where it is, between an individual's rights and what do you do when family members are saying, we have a serious problem, we're scared, and we need help, right? And I don't know what you guys think about that.
Other than news reports, everybody has lots of questions. What drove this guy nuts? What made him snap? I don't know. Not that doesn't change the fact that he obviously had some screws loose and needed professional help, and he's nuts. But more blanks will be filled in later. Was he in debt for millions of dollars? Did he have relationship troubles? Do you have business partners that were going to sue him, and he decided he needed to change the narrative? We don't know, and maybe time will tell.
And Susan, you're right about, there's a balance between identifying people that have mental health needs and respecting that person's right, and not, locking them up, affording them due process. We have the ability to hold someone for 72 hours if we think they're a threat to themselves or others. But when it comes to if someone needs mental help, maybe because they're depressed or they're angry, if they go and seek help, then they lose their right to own guns under law, right? And that may be prohibiting people, especially veterans, from seeking help for PTSD or whatever their mental health is. So we need to figure out a good balance for providing mental health services to people without penalizing them or infringing on their freedoms.
Right. Well, there is certainly a lot more to be learned as these investigations continue into what happened, and I'm sure we're going to be talking about those issues in the future. You are listening to Political Pitchforks on AM 1280 The Patriot. Join us after the break as we talk about Juneteenth events that began yesterday and likely are going on over the weekend, the Israel-Iran conflict, and other issues that are in the news. Thanks very much.
Okay, let's begin.
Welcome back, AM 1280 The Patriot listeners. This is Susan Shogren Smith. I'm here with Jeremy Munson and Jay Duggan on Political Pitchforks that will be airing every Saturday from 9 to 10 a.m. So, Jeremy, why don't you please start off with offering just some final thoughts on the tragedy from last week?
Yeah, thank you, Susan. Some of the reactions from both sides of the political spectrum have come out, but there's been a growing movement from Democrats and Governor Walz to look at changing the gun laws around the state capitol. Currently, and many people may not know this, that if you have a carry permit, you're allowed to carry a gun at the Minnesota State Capitol. And frequently lawmakers, like when I was in office, I would carry a gun all the time when I was in the Capitol because the offices at the state office building were open. I was working there till 10, 11 o'clock at night. The doors were still open. People could just stop in and have a chat with me as a legislator. And it was just to make sure that I was protected at the Capitol, and to restrict gun. Basically, this is you're admitting that there's a whole group of legislators that may be targets, and the movement is to remove their ability to defend themselves. It's absolutely the wrong thing. It's like what they did to schools, where they made schools a target. Any gun-free zone becomes a target for someone who wants to go and assassinate someone. And so this is the wrong approach. And I hope that the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus and some other conservative groups will come forward and say, this is not right. We shouldn't be disarming people.
Well, I know after a lot of the things that happened nationally years ago, September 11th, et cetera, there was a huge reaction. And the Capitol now in D.C. is no longer accessible in the same way. And as a parent, when I took my kids there before those changes happened, it was a totally different experience, even just teaching the history of our country and our nation. And so I think that we're already hearing talk about how they need to potentially start locking down those spaces, changing the way the public has access to legislators and just the buildings that really is our seat of our government, which belong to the people. And I think these are really serious discussions that we're going to have because there are implications for closing those areas off to easy access. So I don't know if you want to comment on that. What do you think, Jay?
No, I think we all expected 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 after he was caught for somebody to start proposing some form of gun control, and it seems like they've settled as a gun-free capital as their low-hanging fruit. I by no means expect that to be their only request. They'll probably pile on and be willing to settle for that, and we'll see how the rest of the politicians see that.
Yeah, and it's not just removing guns from within the Capitol. If you've went and visited the Minnesota Capitol in day or night, you'll realize that the area around the Capitol is actually rather sketchy. And I went up there for the first time since leaving office just a month ago, and I had to park several blocks away, and it's not great. That light rail, the White Castle, and the liquor stores around there, like it's not a great place to bring your kids at night. And so it's important for people to be allowed to protect themselves. And so I think it's really a bad idea.
That's true. They turned the hospital directly behind the Senate building into a homeless shelter during COVID, and that still continues. So there are questionable elements around the Capitol grounds itself.
It's true, and there isn't a lot of parking. I think they might be working on some of that. But when you do have to go down there and you're going to be there in extended hours, it's a long walk from anywhere to get there. No question about it. No question about it.
Yep. Yep. So, Susan, I'd love to talk about our national holiday this week, and which of course is Juneteenth. And I know that so many Republicans came out against this holiday when it was proposed and eventually became a national holiday. But I would encourage Republicans to think about this in a different manner. And I would encourage us to own this and celebrate it, because it is a celebration of a Republican victory of freeing the slaves, right? The Republican Party was founded by abolitionists who were pushing back against the Democrats who were trying to expand slavery into the Midwest. And we were successful in liberating people. Now, I use Juneteenth every year as a reminder that our federal government continues to fund slavery around the world by sending billions of taxpayer dollars to slave owners who are having children in the Congo mines, mining cobalt for the green energy supply chain, China for imprisoning over 1 million Muslim Uyghurs in concentration camps to manufacture solar panels for the U.S. market. This is our opportunity to use this to talk about slavery. And what I would love to start a trend is that we ask people when your Juneteenth is, because if you finish your taxes at the end of the year and you're in a 33 or 40% tax bracket, that every day from January 1st until your Juneteenth, until your day of emancipation, every penny that you make goes to the federal government, the state government, your county government. Okay. So for many of us, our Juneteenth is in May, sometimes even in June, right around this holiday, where every day that we've worked up until now, the government, we're slaves to the government. And then we have our Emancipation Day, and then we can begin keeping all the money that we make from that day on. So I would love to turn Juneteenth into a day of individual emancipation, talking about when, being a slave to government and then being able to keep your money afterwards. What do you think?
Oh, yeah, I 100% agree with you about this. And I talk regularly with my family, my friends, on social media about the movement of slavery offshore. It is one of the most serious issues, I think, that our country engages in economic policy that absolutely enslaves people in China, Central and South America, Africa. The sex trafficking is slavery. It's stunning. And when you say to somebody, there's a reason that shirt at Walmart costs $3, right? Because it was made likely by people enslaved overseas. And so when we talk about slavery like it ended, it hasn't ended for millions of people all over the world. And we should be talking about it. We absolutely should be talking about it. So what do you think, Jay?
No, I 100% agree. Obviously, people who don't understand history seem to think it's a gotcha on Republicans, and Jeremy rightly pointed out that it was a Republican movement that resulted in Abraham getting elected, the Civil War starting, and Abraham Lincoln and his party freeing the slaves. And that should be something proud of. I think we discussed earlier, even before the show started, we'd all hoped at this point in American history that a 250th anniversary of our founding, Juneteenth might become unnecessary. It could be part of the larger independence picture that our Constitution held. The documents have proven out, and within one lifetime of the Constitution being ratified, our country, well, unfortunately, 1 million people had to die, but we fought it out and rectified slavery. And yeah, it shouldn't be a gotcha on America. I think Joe Biden and the people who made it a national holiday think it's a gotcha, but Jeremy's pointing out it's not. It's not a gotcha. And we also should remember the lessons of it. Yes, there's a lot of slavery. We intervened in Libya, and there's still slave markets in Libya. There's still slavery in lots of parts of deep Africa, Sudan, and other places like that, and the Uyghurs. And tragic. And it seems to be only one form of slavery some people care about.
I think one thing I think what might be interesting just to touch on briefly is this issue of the national holidays, and when is something when's it necessary to be a national holiday? When do people just start organizing events that they invite people to come to that are important to them? And then when Trump, I think, actually undeclared it a national holiday, but it's still a state holiday, right? And so how should something become a national holiday? Like, should we have so many national holidays? I mean, I don't know. Election Day is not a national holiday. That's kind of a big deal day. We don't recognize that. I mean, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like, can't this be a good idea without a national holiday? Or
Well, I look, Susan, whether you support slavery or you're against it, I think that if we can shut the federal government down an additional day, we should all enjoy that moment. And so I'm all for shutting the government down on more days, and that's fine with me. I didn't get my mail yesterday. I'm okay with it. Another national holiday is fine. I understand that there's cost involved in it and everything else. I don't support making Election Day a national holiday. I understand the reasons why we want to do that, but I also stand if you make a Tuesday a national holiday, people are going to take 4-day weekends and they're going to leave the state. I think voting actually would go down because people they'll vote early, but then they'll use that 4-day weekend to leave, and I don't think it's going to increase voter engagement at all.
I totally agree with you, by the way, about that. I think I'd rather see it be a 24-hour election day. Start 24 hours of voting. No matter what shift you work, you can vote, and I think that'd be great. I just think we have this need in our society to just make everything a big deal, right? Just everything is a big deal, and I just think that this idea of national holidays, albeit I like your argument, that's how I felt about the Democrats not showing up. I thought it was great evidence that we just shouldn't be having the legislature meet so long anyways. It was like a gift. Every day, one less day for them to impede on our freedoms and our liberties. And I say, let's cut it down to, how about 6 weeks every other year and be done. And if they don't get the work done, too bad.
Well, seeing how the outcomes in our state legislature are predetermined by a group of about 6 people, usually during the first week, I don't know why they just don't have the omnibus bill around February 1st and let us all go home anyways. So.
Right. Exactly. You are listening to Political Pitchforks on AM 1280 The Patriot, and we appreciate you joining us, and we will be back in just a few minutes to talk about some serious national issues. Thank you.
Okay, let's begin.
Welcome back to AM 1280 The Patriot, listeners. This is Susan Shogren Smith here with Jeremy Munson and Jay Duggan. We're on Political Pitchforks. So let's talk about this week's bromance troubles between Trump and Tucker Carlson. So what do you guys have to say?
Well, I would say that, Tucker Carlson, I think he's been pretty consistent anti-war, and I know that he has some comments before about how, he didn't like Iran's position on a lot of things. But overall, I think what we're seeing online is that there's this growing rift between the America First conservatives and the war hawks that want to go in for regime change in Iran and who have wanted to for a long time. And I posted on Facebook yesterday a video compilation of Bibi Netanyahu for 35 or 40 years talking about how Iran is weeks away from a nuclear weapon and we need to do something. So this message isn't anything new. Our head of intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, testified in front of Congress just 90 days ago that they are not weeks away from a nuclear weapon. So we have conflicting data. But ultimately, if we're going to go in Iran, we need to have an exit strategy. We didn't in Iraq. We didn't in Afghanistan. We were there for 20 years, and it cost us tens of trillions of dollars. So I don't think that we should be involved in this fight. Jay, what's your position on this?
I'm 100% in agreement that Trump's initial instinct on this was always correct. And while we'd all like to believe Israel and America wouldn't go to war with Iran until they had a nuclear weapon, you slow down and look at the situation. Israel took out Hamas. They took out Hezbollah. The Syrian regime fell, probably with a little help from Israel and Ukraine. And during that, Iran and Israel had an exchange, and Israel went over and destroyed all their anti-aircraft weapons. If Israel even believes that they might get a nuclear weapon, this is their chance. And they took it. So, and the scary part is what you just said, regime change. The whole reason we want to go softly with Ukraine and Putin is if Putin thinks he's going to be dead at the end of this, there's no limit to what he would do to survive, and he's got nuclear weapons. And now we've just put ourselves in the same position with Iran and crazy people saying regime change. The Libya lesson tells you if these people survive, If they don't have a nuclear weapon, they're going to go to any extent to make one to make sure this never happens again. And that's scary. What will people do if they think they won't be around? They pull out all the stops. You could have 8 tankers sunk in the Hormuz Strait, and we'd be paying $8 a gallon for gas tomorrow. And whether we end up paying directly for a war in Iran or we end up paying at the gas pump, this whole thing has turned into a cluster. And if they really were going to bomb one mountain and move on, they probably should have done it. The longer this goes on, the more it gives the Lindsey Grahams of the world a chance to turn this into a $10 trillion disaster.
So one of the things that was interesting to me, and I think we always have to listen to the narratives that come from all the other countries as well, because when Zelensky, weighed in that they also have a problem with Iran, right? Well, if we have Israel and Zelensky agreeing on something, it must be a good idea, right? I mean, come on. This is crazy, right? So it rarely works out well for us.
If Russia and Ukraine make peace, where does Russia send all of their anti-aircraft missiles tomorrow?
Right.
This whole thing's just a circular cluster.
Yeah.
Yep. One of the risks that bothers me, even if we don't preemptively go in and bomb Iran, at some point, American citizens are going to die, primarily because Israel has probably 100,000, hundreds of thousands, maybe, of Israeli citizens that claim to also have U.S. citizenship. Right. A long time ago, we used to say you can't be dual citizens. And if you want to be a citizen of another country, you have to give up your American passport. And at some point, it changed. And so many people that live in Israel are American citizens. I would urge the State Department to say, if you're a U.S. citizen, you need to evacuate.
How many U.S. citizens were trapped in Iran when this started?
Quite possibly some.
Yeah. I'm sure there's some. I agree with you, Jeremy. I don't think that there should be dual citizenship. I understand for children who have parents of different, who have different citizenship, that when they turn 18, they should be given a period of time when they get to choose. But they should have to choose, because your loyalty really can only be to one country, and you should declare that, because when push comes to shove, we don't know who our conflicts are going to be with, but they are real, and it's becoming more complicated over time. So I agree with you absolutely 100% that this should be absolutely required. Yeah. So Fetterman has been a regular commentator on this. So that also is interesting to me, right? So Fetterman in Pennsylvania, who, some people think he's got a lot of issues, but he comes out with some very interesting statements sometimes. So 2 interesting comments he had about this issue. One was, you're not declaring a war just because you blow up a nuclear facility, right? I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but basically his point is, you can strategically destroy their capability of having nuclear weapons, basically to prevent war, right? So people should, that's an interesting thought, because if you're on the other side of this question, I think you definitely think that attack would be an act of war. But, for people who, that is one, so that was an interesting point. I don't know, you guys like to hear about that. And then he also said, we're not warmongering, we're peacemongering maybe. So what do you think?
You can't drop the most powerful non-nuclear weapon on a country and claim that it's not war. It is an act of aggression, and our Constitution clearly limits the presidential power to get to take offensive action. The president can make defensive moves defending our country, but they can't go and drop bombs on countries without an authorization of Congress. And I know that Thomas Massie is taking a lot of heat right now because he introduced a resolution to prohibit the United States from taking offensive actions until Congress declares an act of war and authorizes that. This is the country we live in has restrictions on what the president can do. It's a balance of power, and he has a lot of Democrats signing on to it because Republicans don't want to be against Trump in this. And but it's important that we not get dragged into a war, and this, I think, is a good move to assert that, hey, we can't take offensive moves. Sorry, Israel. Well, we support you, and if they come and attack you and they come to our shores, we'll be involved, but we don't. You guys have enough to fight your own war.
Let's just hope Trump's original instincts, art of the deal, is in play. I hope this ends with them talking and coming to a resolution to end this, and that all of the hype and talk and bluster is aimed towards that goal, because starting another $10 trillion war would be kind of pointless.
Yeah. And many people online are saying that Israel doesn't have the resources to finish the war. They can certainly get it started, but they can't finish it without our help, which would be a bad move for them. And of course, Iran has no good options out of this either. They certainly aren't going to be victorious in what they're doing.
So when all this is going on, did you guys see the story about that? I think it's a Air Force One, a new some kind of a plane that can withstand every possible kind of attack that landed in D.C. this week, kind of right when some of this discussion was going on.
I think that coincided with a whole bunch of stories that said we sent essentially our whole Air Force and all of our air refueling jets to Saudi Arabia. So hopefully, this is trending towards pressure for negotiation and not a doomsday scenario.
Yeah, it's all, I guess it's all interesting. I think we know in government, whether it be about war issues, whether it be budget issues, any controversial issue, what we know is everybody wants somebody else to be the body that decides to do the thing that they know no matter what, you're going to tick off half the people. And I think that is kind of fundamentally the argument now happening, right? Is Trump going to get to do it, or is Congress going to act? Who's going to do what? And if they don't agree, then what's going to happen? Because fundamentally, nobody really does want to take responsibility for the decisions that tick people off. Trump may be one of the first presidents that actually kind of often doesn't care.
We kicked this off. This is Ted Cruz and Tucker Carlson going at it over what Trump may or may not be doing in Iran. And it gets back to Jeremy talking about the larger division within the Republican Party. There's a group of war hawks who also happen to be okay with open borders as within our coalition. And there's the Trump America First movement. Yep, deport them all until they cry uncle, and don't start any new wars unless it's in our own personal domestic interest. And I think Donald Trump is under a lot of pressure, because now he's got the Republicans siding against him on both issues, depending which way he chooses. So let's hope he sticks to his guns. What he said when he ran for election.
He's sure shining a big light on the chaos in Congress. What do you think, Jeremy?
Last night, I gave a presentation to about 70 people in this group on Southern Minnesota called We Are the Taxpayers. And I talked about how people have limited political capital. You have limited time, treasure, and effort to get things through. This division among conservatives and the Republicans is growing, and it's going to sidetrack us from being effective during Trump's second term. It could literally derail the second term, just like COVID derailed his first term. And we can't let this happen. We need to come up with a solution. I think it should be not go to war, so we can focus on our domestic agenda to make America great again, and to advance our own principles. So I hope that Tucker Carlson I have great respect for. Ted Cruz I've talked to at length. He endorsed me when I ran for Congress. I respect him, but we need to figure out the solution that doesn't lead to war in this one.
Well, there is no question that Trump's history as the king deal maker in everything he does is being tested 100% on this issue. And if he ends up succeeding in bringing this to a close without escalating this into a war that involves not just us and Israel and Iran, but other countries as well, it will be a success. There's no that'll be lucky for all of us and for the world. You are listening to Political Pitchforks on AM 1280 The Patriots. We thank you for listening, and we'll be back after the break. I think we're going to talk a little bit about a recent Supreme Court case on children's rights to receive medical care and parents' rights to be involved. So, we'll be back shortly.
Okay, let's begin.
Welcome back to AM 1280 The Patriot. This is Political Pitchforks. I am Susan Shogren Smith here with Jeremy Munson and Jay Duggan. And I think in this last segment, why don't we start off talking about a recent Supreme Court case that just came down out of Georgia. And while it seems like this won't affect Minnesota, it may embolden legislators in Minnesota to begin trying to raise some of these serious issues related to gender-affirming medical care for minors. This was a 6-3 vote, so it wasn't close. Georgia has a law that blocks puberty blockers for minors who seek to change their sex and various other things. But the court, in a pretty serious, I mean, that's not a close case, 6-3, said that the law is constitutional and states have the right to protect children from these medical services. And obviously in Minnesota, we are at the absolute other end of the spectrum, that not only do we not ban these things, but if there is a child presented as wanting these things, that nobody can even attempt to work with the child to find out why or what the situation is. It's a serious medical issue that cannot even be addressed, really. So I don't know. What do you guys think about this? This will be an interesting topic.
I want to jump into that Minnesota's recent law. So not the trans refugee law, which is a larger issue, but several years ago or a few years ago, there was a law passed on that only allows licensed practitioners to affirm someone's transition. So even if you're in the middle in this issue and you believe that people can think they're a different gender and that we should all play along with it, if your child is confused about what gender they are or they have questions and you want to bring them to a counselor to have them talk through this with a counselor, that counselor or doctor, psychiatrist, psychologist, they are prohibited from questioning or asking your child anything which may lead to your child not seeking a different gender than they were born. That is frightening change in legislation. They can lose their license. If your child goes there confused and comes out going, nope, I talked to my counselor. I was born a boy. I am a boy. I just had some weird thoughts. That is now illegal in Minnesota. If you go and you're confused about it, the only thing your counselor can do is affirm a transition to a different gender. And that should be frightening to most parents. And it can lead to medical castration, physical castration of your child, and permanent life-altering changes.
Should be frightening to the medical community. What if they know the child has another issue or medical condition causing this mental confusion, a chemical imbalance, an environmental something, and they know they can fix it. But like Jeremy said, if you're not confirming affirming the desire for a gender change, you're actually a criminal, and not delivering proper medical care. Scary, very scary.
Well, and I think the issues that we don't like to talk about because it's hard is potentially, was there abuse in early childhood that led a child to have views? That discussion or that attempt to treat a potential trauma, even a known trauma to a child early on, would be potentially prohibited to that therapist. And that is also amazing because we should be trying to help children heal from issues like that. And by the way, we know in the medical field, there's something called Munchausen's by proxy, where parents project things onto their child for attention. There certainly, with the social credit system that we have today, there certainly could be parents who are a member of a group of people that they get a lot of. They're a wonderful parent because they're supporting their child. Who knows, right? There's all kinds of dynamics that come into play in these things that we can't even talk about.
Yeah, it might just be my view, but
even me talking about it now is going to be a problem. Probably
doesn't it seem like a trans child is like the new it thing for the famous people on the red carpet?
Oh, there's no question. Yeah. I mean, it's an incredible thing how in just a short period of time, it has become pervasively talked about. And I have kids. I have teenagers.
If it's a real medical condition and we're wrong, I want to know what's in the water.
Right. My kids were very confused when they were asked to confirm they were a boy, that they wanted to be referred to as a boy. I mean, they came home from school and said, "Why does my teacher think I might not be a boy?" Right? I mean, the mere thought of it. They said, "Why did they ask me that?" Right? So, because we hadn't talked about it, because right? So, I mean, just the initiation of the conversation is confusing to children about why do you even think that. So part of this in Minnesota that is different than Georgia is that we are a trans refuge state, right? That we have a law that says that children can be brought into Minnesota and they'll be protected, right? I mean, Jeremy, how does that work out on a national basis with children who get taken and brought here?
Yeah, so a child from South Dakota whose parents are conservative and don't believe their child should be a different gender, that child could come to Minnesota with their teacher or with their pedophile neighbor and seek refuge in Minnesota. And there could be a court order to return that child to their parents in Nebraska or South Dakota. And this new law in Minnesota, this trans refuge state law, says that we're going to ignore legitimate court orders from other states and protect the child here in our state, give them refuge, and that we will transition them to whatever sex they want to be, or if they want to be a refrigerator, we'll make them into that, and without parental consent. It's just absolutely mind-boggling. Now, I support the right of a 30-year-old man to pretend that he's a woman and pay for getting whatever physically altered to himself or piercings or whatever. Do what you want with yourself. Don't force me to play along with it. But when it comes to children,
pay for it.
Yeah. But when it comes to children who don't have the mental capacity to, to do things like make lifelong decisions, life-altering decisions, they should just be allowed to be children. And until they're adults, we shouldn't be allowing people to medically castrate them. There's a whole movement online called the detrans movement. I would encourage people to Google it. You'll see all these horrific stories about children who were castrated, who've had it's just absolutely horrific that their parents brought them through, or someone else, and they want to go back to the gender that they were born. It's absolutely sad.
Yep.
I would also encourage people, if your liberal friends are in favor of this, remind them how they always talk about, we should have a healthcare system like Europe, like Sweden, like the UK, like France, and remind them that all three of those countries have banned or greatly restricted any trans healthcare, they call it, for minors, because they understand the long-term effects and so many regrets that happen that they are putting a pause on this type of quote unquote healthcare for minors.
Does that make Minnesota a magnet? If more states decide to ban, will we see people coming here? And do we have any doubt that despite the president saying that we aren't going to reimburse medical systems who engage in these procedures, that all the Minnesota hospital systems are still doing it?
Right, like Medica no longer will pay for eye exams for children. I don't know if you know that or not, but they don't pay for that anymore. But I will bet you this is probably a covered service, right? So I think what we're going to see is a lot of consequences in our insurance and our policies. I feel like when you send your child to the schools, the public schools, maybe the schools should have to give you a list of all of the things that they can help your child do without telling you in big, bold, 20-point font, right? In every single language possible. Like in Minneapolis, the 300 languages, they should have to make the form, give it to everybody, and say, if your 8-year-old went into early puberty and would like a Depo-Provera shot, we will make sure they get it, right? If they would like to learn how to put condoms on bananas, we will teach them. If they want to get transgendered, we will do it. Because I don't think parents have any idea the things that kids can be assisted in doing at school without their knowledge. Do you think people know on average?
No, and I'm fearful for doctors in Minnesota having to face lawsuits from parents in other states if they partake in transitioning children without parental consent or in defiance of court orders. I think there's going to be a lot of litigation that comes through this. I hope we can figure this out, and I hope that Minnesota lawmakers, especially on the Republican side, are good at communicating how important this issue is, and that we can take a majority and actually pass legislation to protect children in our state.
Well, and hopefully part of that is going to be our legislators looking at the fact that as insurance companies and healthcare providers are moving clinics into our public schools and children are being seen in those locations without parents' knowledge, that there should be very serious rules put in place to protect the rights of parents. You've been listening to Political Pitchforks on AM 1280 The Patriot. We are a new show that will be on Saturday mornings from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m., and we hope you join us next week. Thank you.